Before we dig into today's episode, I want to take a moment and talk about something close to my home, my journey into podcasting. Dog with a Bone is my first season, and I am beyond grateful to have teamed up with James Basinger and Sasquatch Productions. If you're into deep dives, real boots on the ground investigations, and the kind of storytelling that leaves no stone unturned, you'll want to check out James's own podcast, Hide and Seek. He's currently working on season 4, but if you haven't yet, I highly recommend starting with season 1 through 3. They're all out now. And welcome back to Dog with a Bone podcast. This is episode 8, the Q&A episode. But first, I just want to thank everyone who has submitted questions via Facebook page or called them in. So let's get right to it. The first question is, did you know Mike Justice was running for sheriff for Union County is related to Coots? Yes. Yes, I did. After a while. So here's the story behind that. So yes, Mike Justice is the stepson of Rick Coots, who you all know was the chief of Marysville at the time. And when I was first in Marysville, everyone kept telling me that Mike Justice is related to Coots. And I'm like, okay. Like, I didn't really have everyone figured out yet in my head of all the players. But then all of a sudden, my team laughs at me because it was one night when, we're on the Zoom call and I had a couple White Claws, to be honest. And then for whatever reason, at that moment, finally, the light bulb went off for Melissa. And I'm like, oh my God, Mike Justice is the stepson for Coots. And she's like, yes, this is what we've been telling you for like 2 months. And I'm like, I finally get it now. So it took me a bit. But I will say this. I have had no issues with Union County. I don't know Mike Justice, never talked to the guy. I've heard he's great. The only thing I can say is from my own experience, which is working with Jeff Stiers initially. When I had first called him about Bernie's case, as I mentioned, he wasn't familiar with it. He's like, hey, I really wasn't here at that time. I don't know much about it. Let me look into the case and I'll call you back. And he did. And I will say that Jeff was receptive to me from the get-go. After it takes a little bit. Here I am, right? A civil investigator calling in to be like, I want to help solve a cold case. So of course there's some reluctancy, I would say. But I did provide Jeff with a letter from Pat, the prosecuting attorney from Parkersburg, who wrote a recommendation letter for me. And that's really big that Pat went out of his way and wrote a letter for me and how great it was working with me on Judy's case. So Jeff did take that information. He talked to Marysville. He talked to the prosecuting attorney in Marysville and also with BCI. And then we all got together and worked out really who would be the best to take the lead given the conflict of interest, right? I mean, we have Bernie's death in Marysville. There's obviously suspicion of foul play, a cover-up. You're possibly looking at an officer involved in murdering Bernie. And then you have the stepson of the chief of police at the time in Union County. Between all of us, between Paula, myself, and all of the departments, it was agreed upon that BCI would be the best to take the lead in this case.
Hi, Melissa. This is Tony from Wisconsin calling. My question to you would be, how long can someone survive realistically with a plastic bag over their head? Even in Bernie's case, if his brain was bleeding, how long could he have survived? That's it. Great podcast. Thanks for all you're doing, and I hope to get some closure soon for you.
This was a big question I had from the start, is really how long is it possible for someone to live with a bag placed over their head given the amount of brain bleeding that Bernie had suffered. And according to the majority of the information I researched and trying to reach out to forensic pathologists, if anyone knows one, let me know. It takes an average of 4 to 10 minutes for someone to suffocate with a bag secured around their head. This does vary in time, and that's why it's like a range. There's no like set time, is because it can vary on someone's weight, height, health problems, substances in their system, all of that. We already know that Bernie was knocked unconscious and suffered major brain bleeding. For me, I'm leaning towards the 5 to 6 minute mark, which is a very short window. The next question that I received was, what was Eric arrested for when I visited him in jail? Eric was arrested on April 20th, 2024 for a DUI. He had posted bail that night, but then didn't follow through with the requirements. So he had a warrant out for his arrest. And given the podcast and me looking for him, he decided to turn himself in, which worked really for me. Another question about Eric that I received was, do you feel Eric was being honest in your interview? As honest as I think Eric can be, given his history of drugs and his lifestyle. So the one thing I can say that has not changed for Eric, and that's the time frame of when he left and when he returned. He is very consistent on this time frame of no more than 20 minutes. And the reason why I feel confident or more comfortable taking his word for that is, number one, it hasn't changed over time. But number two is because Bo also supports this timeline. And I find Bo very credible. I think that is more likely the truth. Another question that I get asked often is this question. BCI is located in London, Ohio. Given Nickel is currently the chief of police in London, Ohio, how worried are you about any interference? I'm not at all, actually. And here's why. See, the BCI gets called in when there's like a conflict of interest, which I mentioned earlier. In Bernie's case, we do for those different factors. But I have 100% confidence in Agent Mason. I really like her. She's like me. She's like a dog with a bone. And from day one, when I talked to her and then I met her when I was in Marysville, I gave her a dog with a bone shirt. She's just really open and responsive. She returns my calls, my texts. I have sent her all my interviews, the tape on Nickel. I've sent her everything, and she accepts it and listens to it and appreciates my feedback and insights of everything I have found. So for that, I can say that I don't believe that there is going to be any issue with Nickel being in London. And the good old boy system that everyone has talked about in Marysville, I think no longer exists.
Hi, this is Emily, longtime listener of the season, all episodes of it. First-time podcaster, too, of actually listening to one. Enjoying this one a lot. Can't wait to find out who you figure out is the killer and all of that, too. My question would be, obviously we all enjoy face-to-face conversations, but with this all happening in Ohio and you living in Florida, how many times did you have to travel back and forth? And if you couldn't talk face-to-face, would you prefer text messaging or on the phone with someone when you're actually interviewing them?
Hey, Emily, thanks for listening and for your comment. So I've been back to Ohio twice now, and I just love going back to where the crime took place because there's so much that it tells you. You know, I got to go to Bernie's house. I got to go to Stefan's. I got to meet his sister. I got to travel the route that Jackie and Eric and Bo all made. And I spoke to a lot of people who knew Bernie. And so I will go back as many times as I need to get what I need. In Judy's case, I think I went back 5 or 6 times. And every time I went back, there was a reason. And I will go back again. Same thing with Bernie's. I anticipate or looking at coming back again because there's going to be things that hopefully will be happening and things that I need to follow up on. So I will go back as much as I need to. And then the other part of your question was, if I can't talk to them face-to-face, what would you prefer? If I can't talk to them face-to-face, I would prefer a phone call because I am somebody who reads a lot into text messages and like Facebook messages. Like I have my own dialogue in my head, like majority of people do. So I do not want to interpret someone's text message or Facebook message in a different way. So that wouldn't help the investigation if I try to apply my own voice to what they're trying to say. So I find that talking to them on the phone, it helps me hear the tone that they have, what they're saying, and it eliminates me trying to assign intent, right, behind what they're trying to convey to me. Great question. These are such good questions. I'm having so much fun. The next question I got was, where did I even come up with Dog with a Bone for a podcast name? I love this question. And because the reason why I love it so much is because I love the name of the podcast, number one, of course. But number two is because it talks about empowerment. It talks about, fighting for the truth, fighting for justice. And that is what we're doing. Okay. So a couple of years ago, I had a boss who would have meetings with me and he would tell me things that other people are saying about me and how I'm behaving or what I've said or all these things. And I was sitting there going, well, that's not how that went, or that's not what I meant, or, oh my God, I can't believe they felt that way. And being a social worker and just my nature, I'm going to go talk to the person. And being an adult and a leader, I'm going to go talk to them because number one, I don't want them to think that, or if they thought that I meant something I didn't mean, I'd rather just clear the air and move forward as adults and a leader. But what ended up happening was when I would go talk to these people, and mind you, this wasn't like a one-time thing. This was like years of this. I would have people say, well, that's not what I said, or I never said that, or that's not how that went. And so, of course, then people would go back to my boss and be like, Melissa came and talked to me and about this. And then he would come back and talk to me about why I went and talked to them. And people don't like to be confronted and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, I'm not confronting them, but wouldn't you rather I sort this out like leader to leader? I mean, that I think is a good leader. And it was never aggressive. But what I realized was happening is that I was hearing such different stories every time, and they were all the same thing as people just saying, that's not what I said, that's not true. And so you have to wonder, like, was what I was being told true, right? So he told me one time in a meeting, of course, wanting to kind of put me in my place or put me down or whatever his intention was like, his exact words were to me, you're like a dog with a bone. You just don't know when to quit or, stop. And in that moment, of course, it hurt. It was like, well, I'm trying to do the right thing in my head, but you just call me a dog with a bone when I'm trying to be a leader and make sure that I am good with other leaders. I don't know. Maybe it's wrong. But he then told me at that point, basically stop questioning what you're being told by me. And so as I was working with James and looking at this, and James like, what do you want to name your podcast? I'm like, I don't know. And then it all of a sudden hit me like, I'm a dog with a bone. You darn right I am. And what a great name for a podcast and for an investigator who is digging for truth and won't stop when she's being told lies. Like, if you're going to tell me something, I'm going to go follow it up. I'm not going to take what you say at face value if it doesn't feel right. And anybody should do that. If you have a gut feeling and it's not what you think or you want to follow up with it, you have every right to do that. As an investigator, it is critical that you do that because most of the time, people are lying to you. People surrounding the victim, people with different personalities, everyone can lie and manipulate. And darn right, I'm a dog with a bone. I'm going to keep asking questions and circling back and circling around you until the truth comes out. And that's where I came up with the name. All right, moving on. The next question is, are you afraid for your safety? To be honest, I was initially. And I can remember when I had that, again, light bulb moment when I sat there and thought to myself, am I looking at a police officer who is responsible for Bernie's murder? And that frightened me because if it is an officer, if it is Glenn Nichol, I heard about how violent he can be. And being a police officer, yeah, that's not a good feeling. When you're uncovering and digging and you're putting this out there on the waves, you're putting your name behind it. And that can be very, very scary. I will say that for sure. But I can tell you that there's safety in coming forward. And what I mean by that is I no longer felt unsafe when I realized that it would be really stupid for him, for anyone he knows to do anything to me, because I'm on the air and I'm putting out there that he could be responsible, or anyone, right? Any of these people could be responsible. And if anything happens to me, who's the first person they're going to go look at, right? I mean, first of all, my family would go after the person. My sister, let me tell you, she's another dog with a bone. You don't want to make her mad. But I have Agent Mason. I have Parkersburg. I have people that care about me. And I have no doubt that if anything ever happened to me, they would have an army on their hands. So that provides me some safety. And also, you know, I was worried when people asked me, well, you live in Florida, you know, do you think you need a restraining order from him? And I don't think that at this point in his life, if it is him, whoever did it better just lay low, right? Like, why would you want to draw more attention to yourself by committing a crime that's only going to show and direct more people your way? Ooh, this is a good one. The question is, do you get paid for doing the podcast? Oh, this question, it is so interesting that people are always wondering, like, you're just doing this to make money and get likes. And everyone, I am not living the high life here. I can tell you that. I won't be quitting my day job anytime soon. So no, everything I do is actually out of me and my family's own pocket. And this is why I mean by my family supporting me. It makes me a little tearful. Everything I do costs money. So my equipment, my trips to Parkersburg or Ohio, the time of producing all these episodes, everything comes out, the marketing, all of that comes out of the sweat, tears, and money of my family. That's things that could be going to my family that they're investing in me so that I can do what I love. So no, I do not get paid for anything. You know, even with these shirts and the tumblers that are coming out, I'm not making any profit, everyone. I decided that I would rather have people love the podcast and get shirts and tumblers and all of that for the cost that the creator who makes them is selling them at. I didn't want to bump up the price and make like $4 or something ridiculous. I would rather you all be proud and wear that stuff. So I don't even make anything from that. To be honest, there is a point, hopefully real soon, where I will be eligible for ads in the podcast. But I can tell you that that's not, again, anything worth writing home about, okay? It is minimal for what you do for a podcast of this nature. But of course, I'm working hard. My family's working hard. And if there is at some point an opportunity where I can get some of that back, or yeah, I mean, how great would that be if I can pay back my family, right? So that's that. It's a great question, but it also brings out a lot of emotion because it's never meant to be insulting, but it can feel that way because you're like, I just like pour everything. I come off my normal job and I work on this, and my husband does the same because he supports me, and there isn't any money to be made. I worked all on Judy's season and didn't make a dime. So that is the truth of it. And people are like, well, how can we help you? You know, hey, I could start like a subscription fund. But again, I'm not even interested in doing that. I feel that this is my passion, is to solve cold cases. And I think at some point, hopefully there will be an opportunity for me to regain or get back some of the money, but that's not why I do it. Another question from the lovely Dog Pound is, do you think Eric had anything to do with Bernie's murder? You know, this question, I don't. I think he is 100% the inside man for setting up the safe. No doubt, 100%. But I don't think he's responsible for killing him and then putting a bag over his head. I don't think he would have the forethought or the capacity, maybe, to think that quickly. I don't see it happening. Someone also asked me, how many episodes do you anticipate? Right now, I am looking at 10 or 11 episodes, but that can change really based on what happens with BCI. If BCI hopefully will be getting back to me here shortly on what they're going to do. So BCI, let me explain this. BCI right now, Agent Mason, is looking at the whole case and looking at, is there an opportunity for them to take the investigation due to a conflict of interest, which we know that there was. And so Agent Mason's taking everything that I've given her, everything the BCI already had, and putting together a report. And hopefully that comes back and they're able to take the case, which, I mean, I really don't see how you can't take it at this point. There was clearly an interference. There was a mishandling of things, a wrong manner of death. There is just so much here that we've already talked about in all the episodes. I really don't see how that wouldn't happen. And following that question, another question was, is there going to be a season 2? I sure hope so. I hope there's going to be a season 2, but it all depends on all of you. Would y'all come back for season 2? If I did do a season 2, is there any unsolved homicide cold case you would want me to dig into? But here's a couple of my requirements, though. Don't just start rattling off like famous cases, because I won't do those. They have enough coverage. Everybody knows about them. Other podcasts have done them. I'm looking for cases that there hasn't been a lot of coverage on. Maybe they lived a higher risk lifestyle, or their situation, they're not that they don't deserve people who are, white and blonde and beautiful the same amount of coverage, but everyone's already doing those, right? I want to look at cases that people who've forgotten them. Bernie's somebody I feel like whoever was responsible for killing him thought that they could get away with it because who cares, right? That's how I took it. Like, who cares about Bernie? No one's really going to care about him. He was, they create this narrative. He was this drug king. He was this drug guy selling a bunch of drugs and snorting a bunch of coke. And even if he was, that doesn't even matter, right? You still don't have the right to take somebody's life. But as we find out, we get to know Bernie, and the narrative is very different. And so I'm looking for cases like that. I'm looking for cases where they didn't get a lot of coverage and there is this lost voice. And that's where I want to be. Find that voice again. So let me know. Another question I received is, has Eric reached out since the last episode? Eric has not reached out. I think this question's referring to in the last episode. I was like, hey, Eric, give me a call. No, he has not. From my understanding, Eric is kind of in hiding, if you will. I heard from somebody in his family who, wasn't happy with what I was doing. And I guess Eric is upset that thinks I'm putting his life at risk now. And because I had posted that he said the cops killed Bernie. Again, this goes back to my own safety, is Eric has been telling people for 30 years that the cops killed his friend, right? This isn't anything new. Me putting it out there, again, safety in numbers. I don't believe that whoever's responsible for killing Bernie is going to come find Eric because he said that. I have Dean on the last episode who puts his name behind what happened to him and his dealings with Nickel. So again, more people are coming forward. And so I don't think that, honestly, I don't think that that's what it was about. If I want to be completely honest, I think it has to do with him and Jackie fighting, because Eric called Jackie out on the podcast, and Jackie and Eric have a long history of substance abuse. And I think that it was on the weekend. And I think that there's more to it than that, because in my head, I was thinking, I did a whole episode 3 on Eric being the inside man and didn't hear crap. And all of a sudden, now Eric's afraid for his life and all this other kind of stuff. I think there is more to it than that. But no, he has not reached out.
Hi, yes. My question is, how and when did you run across the cold case of Bernie?
I was looking for the next case that I wanted to work on after Judy Petty. Of course, I'm never done with Judy Petty's case. I continue to follow leads, information, stay in contact with the detective on Judy's case and the family. I talk to the family often. So you're never fully done. But when I decided I had traced every lead I could possibly chase, it was time for me to look at a different case. And so I was working with James at the time, and I felt kind of lost. I didn't know what to do, actually, because I had such a great experience with the Petty family and the detective, and Parkersburg in general has been an amazing community who has fully engulfed me. Alexis, the reporter from WTAP, had me on so many times, and her and I continue to stay in contact. So I was nervous about finding another case where I would have that same level of embracement, if you will. And would it be the same as that I've had? I was looking through cold cases and I came across Bernie's case. And the one thing that stood out to me right away was there was this Facebook page and it said, who killed John Burnside? And again, there was like 22 people on that page. And I'm like, 22 people? When you look at other cases that have been unsolved for 30 years and they have a page like that, you have thousands and thousands of people on that page. I'm like, why does Bernie only have 22? And then I started reading more about Bernie's case. I saw the flyer that Union County had put out on Bernie's case and saw that it was initially ruled a suicide and then changed to a homicide. And I was like, well, how does that happen? Like, why was it first ruled a suicide and what made them change it to a homicide? So that's when I really started to dig in and like, what is going on here in Marysville? It was probably in February of 2024 when I started. And once I read about Bernie's case, I knew that this was going to be my first season was about Bernie, because at the end of the day, I thought, who's still fighting for Bernie, right? And I will fight for Bernie. So if you are on the Facebook page, there was a poll that I did on Monday, and the question is this: do you think the Black Book was taken because it had Coots and Nichols' name in it? Oh, I love this question. Yes. Okay. No, not yes to the question, but I love this question. So as we know, the Black Book was never logged into evidence and it was never returned to the family. So really, the answer is, I don't know. And I posted this question on Facebook on Monday to see what you all thought. And it looks like the majority of you think the Black Book was not logged into evidence because, the person who took it is using it to further their own investigation or bullying or intimidation. And that's why it was never logged in. And for me, I would have to agree. That's what I think. I think that the book was used as power and control. And I think that whoever had that book at that time used the information to their benefit and didn't want to log it into evidence. I have not heard from anybody since I started this investigation. Not that it's not true, maybe just no one has told me yet. But I do not believe, or I've not heard that Coots or Nickel were involved with cocaine. I have not heard that. So I'm not going to assume their name was in that book because I haven't heard that they did use cocaine. And that's the truth. I can't assume that.
Hey, Melissa, thanks for Dog with the Bones. Been great. Love it. Thanks for standing up for Bernie. My question is, Jackie and Eric, brother and sister, where do their stories align and where do their stories differ? Because something's fishy. Thanks so much. Look for justice for Bernie. Keep on digging.
This has actually been a real struggle for me, if I'm being honest. So Eric and Jackie have similar stories, but they vary in details. And the details are, what's that saying? The devil in the details? That's really hard for Jackie and Eric because Jackie and Eric have an extensive history of substance abuse and alcohol. And part of when you have that kind of history, it is very, very difficult to tell the truth. Things get mixed up. You become manipulative. You you live this lifestyle where you're surviving day to day. And so, for example, Jackie says, Eric pushed me back on my ass and told me to get out. But when I asked Eric if Jackie was there, he said no initially. And I'm like, really? She wasn't there? No. Well, she said that she was there. Well, maybe she was there. I don't remember if she was there. And I have a hard time with that because I think, okay, if you just found your buddy dead with a trash bag over his head, I would think you would remember who's with you. That's like an ingrained memory, even with all the substance abuse, I would think. And he remembers Wessel was with him. That hasn't varied. And Jackie said that Wessel was with them. So really, who was there besides Eric and Wessel? I don't know if Jackie was there or not because Jackie says she was, Eric said she wasn't, and Eric really wavers back and forth. He's not sure. I really don't know. It's anyone's guess. But the other thing I'll say is that where they align, where it's the same is, like I said, that Wessel was there. They both said that, so I think that's true. The other part they align is that Jackie called the cops when they went back to the bar to see if Bernie was arrested. They both say that. They both say that, and I believe Bo said that as well, is that they called to say, hey, do you have him in custody? Because they were going to go bail him out. And that's when they were told, no, we don't have him in custody. He's just sleeping, which we all know is bonkers. You don't go right to bed in 15 minutes when the cops are just at your house. But they both have that detailed the same, and that the time frame of when they went back. Eric, for 30 years, has always said 20 minutes. He's always said that. I looked at his timeline he provided back then. Same thing. And I think that, again, is it stuck in his brain. Even with the history I talked about, that is stuck in his brain. A very important detail that hasn't changed. I'm guessing this, and plus I heard this as well from Eric's family member the other day. But the reason I can speak to substance abuse and the personality disorders and mental health is because I am a licensed clinical social worker. So I went to school and I studied and I have a degree and a license and have worked with substance abuse and personality disorders. So I can diagnose people and I can read people knowing their behaviors. And I can tell you that Jackie and Eric both have all of the personalities and behaviors of an addict. They are very manipulative. They will tell you a different story every day of the week. They're just trying to survive. And they often don't remember what the truth is because they lie so much they don't know. So I can say that based on my years of experience. I've been a social worker since 2005. So I can tell you that I was very quick in identifying both of their behaviors in my head and realizing who I was talking with and take that into context as to their history. You all are coming up with such great questions. The next question I got was, why do you think so many people are now coming forward with information on Nickel/Marysville PD? I don't think it's so many people coming forward now. I think they've always been there. So the first 9 months, and when I was in Marysville the first time, everywhere I went and I asked about Bernie's case, everyone told me it was the cops. It was the cops. It was cover up. They would even, majority of people would throw out Nickel's name or they would say the cops, Coots covered it up. I mean, it was constant everywhere in that town. Anyone I talked to who knew anything about Bernie's case, they all feel that this was done and it was done by the cops and that justice has never happened. And that's not new. I think the difference is, again, safety in numbers. People feel safe and they finally have a voice. And so people are calling and talking about it, not so much just in their town that they've talked about it in 30 years. They have a platform. I'm giving them a platform to find justice. And like Dean told me, he's not scared anymore. There's such fear in Marysville that Nickel created that people stopped talking and they stopped bringing this up and worried. I mean, when I first started the investigation, people didn't want their name attached to it still because they were afraid. Now they're coming forward and saying, go ahead and use it. I'm fine. Like, it's been 30 years. What can he do to me now? Or what can they do to me now? And I think it's, again, because at this point, they're ready for justice. The town of Marysville is ready for something to happen. Whoever's responsible for his murder, Marysville wants it solved, period. And the only people that can do that is the BCI, Union County, and Marysville working together to make that happen. So hopefully that's what happens. Here's a question from Wen on Facebook. So Wen had asked, when Jackie said that she saw Bernie's tube socks, did she lie about being on scene? Who was all at the scene when he was discovered? Wen, this is such a great question. And going back to what I had said earlier, I really don't know who was on scene. I know that for sure Eric and Wessel showed up the first time. When they called the cops, they did not stay and wait. They actually, I believe that's when Eric went back to the bar, and then Jackie called about breaking in or going in. And I think that's when Jerry Nickel, that I mentioned last time, was the first officer back at the scene. So this next question, I was wondering if I should cover this on an upcoming episode. And the question is, if charged with murder, what do you think the charges should be? I've thought about this for quite some time, but let me go over first what the differences are between first, second, and third degree murder so that we can kind of have a discussion about this. First degree murder, there has to be different elements to first degree murder. There has to be like a malice after a forethought, which means that the crime was committed with a blatant disregard for human life and a clear intent to kill or torture. So it has to have that element. They have to premeditate it. They have to bring something that they plan to commit the murder, and then intent, which is really the key word here, is looking at intent. That would all come to first degree. The elements of second degree murder is it doesn't have the premeditation as with the first degree, but it also has an intent to harm. I think that what happened was somebody lost their temper, was in a rage, and ended up striking Bernie so hard that he had a brain bleed. He would have died from that. Third degree has to have these elements. Intent to harm, so there's an intent to cause harm to the victim, but not intended to kill. And also no premeditation. A third degree murder cannot be premeditated or planned in any way. It's usually the result of committing other felonies or things like that. And the last question from you all is there anything we can do to help Bernie's case? You're all doing it. You're all doing it. I appreciate all the support. Again, you purchase shirts, tumblers, you share the Facebook post, you continue to talk about Bernie, you help hang up flyers around Marysville, you're sending messages to people to help me connect with other people. You're all doing it. You are all helping solve Bernie's case. And the family could not be more appreciative. I talked to Paula, we text at least once a week after the episodes, and she's really happy with everything that I have done, that I am doing, and grateful and thankful, and just finally hoping that her brother and her family finally get justice. I mean, they were treated horrifically by Nickel and Coots, and they deserve an apology, and they deserve an arrest. That's my 2 cents on that. Next time on Dog with a Bone. Did you ever talk to John about this?
I asked him if he killed him, and he said no.
Do you feel that he was telling you the truth?
I do feel that he was telling me the truth.
The day that I was questioned at the sheriff's department, and when I was asked who I thought did it, since I didn't think Alan and John did it, and he tried to put me at the scene of the crime, I said, "Trick no good." He says, "Well, who do you think did it?" I said, "Well, you really don't want me to tell you that. Who do you think did?" He kind of got up a little closer on his desk, closer to my face. I said, "I'm glad you're sitting down." I said, "Because you're going to need to be sitting down for this." He says, "What?" I said, "You did it." His face turned as red as my hair. He swung his arms across the desk, knocked everything off the desk, got up, walked out the back door back to the police station.
Dog with a Bone is hosted, investigated, produced, and written by Melissa Sandberg. Additional writing by Caitlin Sandberg. Edited by Jason Sandberg. Theme music by Alex Yukich. Dog with a Bone is a Sasquatch production.